Hello there. Today I watched the classic film Misery, and now I want to tell you about it. Directed by Rob Reiner, this thriller follows a writer named Paul Sheldon, who is played by James Caan. On his way home after completing his newest novel, Mr. Sheldon finds himself in the middle of a blizzard. He struggles to maintain control of his car, and after sliding for quite some time, his car tumbles off the road and rolls into the forest below. Luckily, a fan of his pries open his car and carries him to safety. When he wakes up, he finds himself in her home, but soon his relief turns to fear and horror when the woman, Annie, played by Kathy Bates, won't let him leave. The film is based on a Stephen King novel and was adapted into a screenplay by William Goldman. It has a small cast, only uses a few locations, and features a relatively straightforward story. Visually, it looks like most modern low-budget thrillers, and sound-wise it uses scored instrumentals. The most impressive part of the film is the acting, with James Caan and Kathy Bates both putting on spectacular performances. Misery sets out to scare you with the tense and horrifying atmosphere that exists within Annie's house. Paul is being held captive there, and the only person who seems to want to find him is the local sheriff. Paul tries to placate Annie by playing along with her delusions, and she slowly becomes more unhinged as the story progresses. The film starts off by introducing us to Paul Sheldon and then quickly jumps into the meat of the scenario. We meet Annie Wilkes, Paul's #1 fan, and within 10 minutes we get a good idea of how psychotic she is and how much danger Paul is in. Within 20 minutes she's had a full-on breakdown, and the only questions remaining are whether or not Paul will live and whether Sheriff Buster will catch Annie. Most of the story is Annie and Paul talking with a bit of tension underneath. The entire time Paul is trying to escape. Whenever he's alone in her house, he's creeping around in his wheelchair trying to find anything to fight back with, while also making sure he doesn't leave anything out of place. Then there's Sheriff Buster and his wife investigating Paul's disappearance. It consists of Buster meeting with different people and asking them if they know anything about it. Most of them don't, but they do give him little details about Paul's personality. The story is consistent the entire time, and while it all makes sense, it isn't all that exciting. There is a little bit of tension between Paul and Annie, but it quickly wears off when you realize she isn't going to kill him until the end, and the only action is her getting upset and throwing temper tantrums. When things finally get moving near the end of the film, it happens quickly. There's very little detail, and the ending is entirely unsatisfying. I found myself left wondering why it took him so long to take action and what the point of the sheriff was in the story. Cast-wise, there are 2 big performances in the film and 2 supporting characters. Paul, played by James Caan, gets the most screen time, and he does the most arduous role. As Paul, he has to play out an incredible injury and try to go through this scenario without the use of his legs. He does a fantastic job of emoting the pain and looking like an invalid while also being quite charming. He does his best to joke with and smile for Annie whenever she's around, and then drops the act as soon as she's gone. He does a fantastic job with the subtle emotions he's asked to show throughout the film and manages to tell an entire story with just his face. Kathy Bates' Annie is clearly hiding something from the very first time she appears on screen. She seems chipper and nice, but gets kind of hesitant when asked about the roads in the phone. First time she goes ballistic on Paul, she seems like a totally new person, but from then on, all bets are off. She delves deeper and deeper into her psychotic nature, but has these little moments of lucidity that almost make you feel sorry for her. She's terrifying, and his fearful reactions toward her are wonderful. Outside of the 2 of them, we have Richard Farnsworth and Frances Sternhagen as Sheriff Buster and his wife. They don't get much screen time, but they're a cute couple with a small-town friendly vibe. Buster is a thorough investigator and puts together quite a few loose ends. His story ends up being somewhat pointless, but Farnsworth and Sternhagen played the most likable characters in the film. Visually, the film doesn't have much going on. The journey is a straightforward experience with no real surprises and no standout moments. The film does a good job of capturing the actors' performances and providing a steady, stable view of the action, but it doesn't do much beyond that. There are only a few locations in the film, and most of them are small town buildings without much going on. The story takes place in the mountains, and we do get a few shots of the outdoors, but it's all snow and trees. Sound-wise, the film makes use of scored instrumentals and a bit of ambient noise in order to set the mood and intensify certain situations. The tracks aren't all that memorable, but they do a decent job of creating an eerie atmosphere for the film to play in. There are moments where it attempts to follow the beats of the story, but they don't have much of an impact. There was also a lot of silence in the film, especially during tense moments. There was one moment where the sheriff was in the house and talking to Annie that would have been perfect for a tension track that got faster and slower as he got closer and farther from Paul. Overall, Misery is an okay thriller, but it gives you most of the answers early on in the film and doesn't leave itself many avenues to explore. The story ends up being a somewhat boring tale of a woman terrorizing a famous person in her home while a cop tries to find him. There's no big action, nothing overly dramatic happens, and they didn't develop the characters well enough to make up for it. I don't think this film lives up to the hype around it, and if I had to give it a modern rating, I'd say it was a 5 out of 10. Remember though, these are just my thoughts on the film. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Bye-bye!